Welcome, folks. Thank you for coming on board. We're going to give it another minute before we get started. But while we are waiting, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, where you're geographically located, and then if you're affiliated with any community or organization. Great. So we're about 3 minutes after the hour. So inshallah, we'll get started. Bismillah walhamdulillah salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this April update coming from the No Muslim Ban Ever Coalition. The No Muslim Ban Ever Coalition is a coalition of different organizations that are leading the advocacy fights as well as some of the grassroots kind of strategy around responding to any travel bans. And it consists of Empower Change, Muslim advocates, CAIR SFBA, and Asian Law Caucus. So we're really grateful that y'all are coming to us to get some updates, and hopefully we can share some resources and field questions that are helpful for y'all. So just as an overview for today, before I hand off my portion here, we're just going to have an opening remarks and opening reflections from the Executive Director of Empower Change on what this moment means for us. And then we'll kind of go over some of the nitty-gritty and the overview of the immigration policies here. Then we're going to specifically talk about what we're anticipating and what's already kind of come down the pipeline from the Trump administration, including some of the pending TPS terminations facing Afghanistan and the visa revocations in South Sudan, as well as what's been happening with students across the country. And then we're going to go over to CAIR SFBA, and they're going to share a little bit about tips and advice for best practices around traveling in the next couple of months. I don't know, for the Muslim community, Hajj, Umrah is coming up, as well as other kind of travel. Then we'll open up for a Q&A and a conversation via chat in this webinar. And then we'll kind of close with recommendations and next steps around actions that we recommend, as well as resources that our partners here have to offer. So I hope that sits well, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Yasmin. Or am I handing it to Linda?
You're handing it to me, Ashraq.
Got you. Go ahead.
Ashraq, you're the one that put the agenda together. So just kidding. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I just feel deeply honored and humbled to be here. There are going to be many more, much more brilliant folks than me who are going to be sharing really important information on this webinar. Sometimes people say knowledge is power and they think it's like a cliche, but knowledge, in fact, is power. When you have knowledge, when you have information, when you have the resources, when you have the tools, when you have access to those who are experts in these areas, it allows you to make well-informed decisions, and it allows you to feel confident moving around in a world right now that is targeting the many communities that we come from. I'm just here to say to all of you that we're really all we got. This administration is antithetical to solidarity, to uplifting the most marginalized people. This is an administration that is hell-bent on terrorizing the very communities that we come from. All marginalized communities are targets of this administration. And we have seen them threaten us with all different types of executive orders, all different types of policies. And they're in fact implementing them, and they are being challenged in the court of law. But as we all know, challenging this administration in court sometimes takes very long. And in the meantime, there are students who are still detained across the country. There are many names you do not know. We just know the ones that have been kind of promoted, or the ones whose stories are being told publicly. But there are many beyond the Mahmoud Khalis, beyond the Ramziyas, beyond the Muhsin Meddawis. We also know that there are visa revocations that are happening around people from different parts of the world. And what I want to say to all of you today is that the administration seems to want to pick us off one by one. Usually what they've done in the past is they said, here's the list of countries, here's how we're going to operate. And in fact, this time around, they're saying, no, we're going to distract you by doing maybe one country at a time in hopes that people aren't stepping up, aren't showing the type of solidarity that every single nation that's being targeted, or the people from those nations that are being targeted, receive the solidarity that they deserve. So here at Empower Change at the No Muslim Ban Ever Coalition, we want to be your place of resources, your place for information. We will continue to put out updates and making sure that our communities know what's coming down the pipeline, where the legal challenges are, when the legal challenges are won and when they're not won. And what does it mean when your visa is revoked? What kind of recourse do people have? But in the meantime, it's about solidarity. We hope that many of you who are here, and as I was looking in the folks that were posting where they were from, some people shared different organizations that they were from that were not Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, or organizations that necessarily support immigrant communities or are serving immigrant communities, but it seems like you're here to learn about what types of actions you can take in this moment in solidarity. Our neighbors are scared, and rightfully so, because they are watching these videos, they are watching this administration engage in this type of rhetoric that is dehumanizing. And for those of us who are Palestinian, we know that dehumanization of people is very dangerous. The more you dehumanize people, the more people will justify harm against those communities. And so I'm just honored to be here. These folks that will be speaking to you today are my colleagues. They have been on the front lines. Unfortunately, we had to resurrect the No Muslim Ban Ever Coalition because, as you know, this started back in 2017, and we never believed that we would be here again, but here we are, trying to stay prepared, trying to organize. And the last thing that I'll say is that, fear is a choice. And for us as organizers and for our organization and our coalition, we're choosing to be brave in this moment, choosing to be bold, and choosing to stay on the front lines of defending our communities. We are not scared of Donald Trump or his administration. We are not scared of these policies. We know that much of this will be temporary. And in the meantime, the most important thing to us is protecting our people and making sure that our communities have the information that they need so they can act accordingly. And so thank you all for being here. I'm going to pass this on to Yasmin Tayyib, who's the Political and Legislative Director at Empower Change.
Great. Thank you so much, Linda, for that. And before we start, just a short disclaimer that we just need to do is this event is intended to share general legal information about your rights. It is not legal advice. If you have questions about your individual situation, we encourage you to talk to an immigration attorney, and we'll share resources and how you can find free or low-cost advice. Well, thank you so much again to everybody for joining us today. As Linda noted, what we're seeing right now is the Trump administration advancing its authoritarian agenda through a cruel, inhumane, and unconstitutional crackdown on our rights, whether it's through the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act to unlawfully deport immigrants to El Salvador, termination of TPS for Afghanistan, the South Sudan visa revocation, or the termination of status for more than 1,000 international students and the targeting and abduction of international students advocating for Palestinian rights. I mean, just very quickly, and we plan on doing a separate webinar just focusing on this. But with respect to the targeting of our students, just wanted to note that the good news is that nationally there have been numerous TROs, this is called temporary relief, provided to international students who have had their status terminated, with one civil action that's now mandating the government to reinstate the student status by close of business today for 133 international students. At Empower specifically, we have been working heavily to ensure a very strong response from members of Congress in response to students being targeted for their First Amendment protected activity in support of Palestinian rights. And our members have sent tens of thousands of letters to Congress urging their members of Congress to speak out in support of the students. We worked specifically with Representative Jayapal's office, who led a letter in support of Mahmoud Khalil that more than 100 members of Congress joined. We helped with outreach on a congressional letter in support of Ramesa Asturk, led by Representative Presley. And shortly after Mohsen Mahdawi was abducted in Vermont at his naturalization interview, we worked with Representative Becca Balint's office, who led a letter signed by nearly 70 members of Congress calling for Mohsen's immediate release. And we'll drop those links later on in the webinar, where you can also continue to take action for our students. Now, with respect to the new travel ban that will be part of our discussion today, as many of you know, this is something we were expecting last month by about March 20th, March 21st. Donald Trump's original Muslim ban, as again, folks remember, was a stain on America's conscience. President Biden's executive order rescinding the various versions of the ban was an important first step. But on the campaign trail, As folks may recall, Trump promised a renewed and expanded Muslim ban that he previewed in an executive order on his first day back in the White House. Any travel ban, we've been, raising the alarms about, and all the communities, organizations, movements we work with believe and understand that it's a form of collective punishment on a global scale that directly will impact millions of people. And to ensure that our communities do not face the threat of family separation, xenophobia, Islamophobia through the implementation of another unconstitutional and unconscionable ban by Trump, we have been calling on Congress to take action and pass the No Ban Act. Now, while the travel ban itself that reportedly discussed various drafts and up to 43 countries that would potentially be impacted in various ways, well, that travel ban has been delayed, as been noted by my colleagues. We wanted to come together today to provide you with key updates and also discuss, kind of key issues and updates coming up around various immigration policies impacting our communities, and ensure that you have the necessary guidance and tools to be prepared during any upcoming travels, or in the event that you, your family, or neighbors are targeted by this administration. So I wanted to go ahead and introduce our first speaker. Diana Konate is the Deputy Executive Director of Policy at African Communities Together. We're grateful to have been able to work with her throughout the years. She works to ensure that the interests of African immigrants are considered in federal immigration policy, and prior to ACT, Diana worked on the Hill. So she's going to talk a little bit through the South Sudan ban announcement, what it entails, how the community will be impacted, and any sort of next steps and action items that she may share with you. Thank you so much, Diana.
Thank you. And hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on tonight to talk about the visa revocation for South Sudan. So as you all likely know, the State Department came out with a statement. I think it's been about 2 weeks now. It feels like all the days are just running into each other, but came out with an announcement that it was immediately revoking all visas held by South Sudanese passport holders in the U.S. and preventing the issuance of new visas for South Sudanese. And that announcement and the visa revocation has been quite devastating, as you can imagine, for the community, and including creating a lot of confusion within the community about what it means. And so a lot of our work has been community facing. We've created an FAQ which attempts to explain the visa revocation, what it means, what it doesn't mean. And I think that will be shared here or after this this presentation, but we've also started to organize the South Sudanese community around this revocation and supporting them as they push back against this visa revocation. In addition to that, a lot of our work with the South Sudanese community had previously been around TPS. The country had been designated for TPS. And so South Sudanese, to begin with, should not be returned to South Sudan. And I should take a step back and mention that the reason that the State Department gave for the visa revocation was that South Sudan was not accepting deportees from the U.S., which, going back to my point, we should not be deporting anyone to South Sudan currently, given that the country has a TPS designation. And for those who are unfamiliar, TPS is temporary protected status, which is given to a country when DHS has determined that the conditions in that country are so bad that it is unsafe to deport people to that country. So South Sudan is one of the, I think it's about 16 countries that currently have TPS designations. Of course, we've seen this administration work its way through those designations to do away with that protection that we're currently affording those individuals. And with South Sudan, as it relates to the country conditions, as an example of the country conditions, the State Department itself recently updated travel advisory to reflect the departure of U.S. government personnel from the country because of the security threats within the country. So, you know, all that to say, we should not be sending people back to South Sudan. This shouldn't even be an issue. But here we are. And so we're doing what we can to push back against it. We have seen that the South Sudanese government has come out with a statement saying that they, you know, will accept, they will be working with the Trump administration to accept deportees, naming one deportee in particular that I think there was some, you know, some concerns around, but you know, so we don't know whether that that means that we will see an end to the visa revocation. Unclear, but this isn't something that we want to see for any country moving forward. So despite what happens with South Sudan, I think we really want to do what we can to push against this, make as much noise as we can, even if at times it feels like we're making all this noise and nothing is happening. I think that that it's incumbent upon us to still push back forcefully against any of the current administration's attempts to keep immigrants out, to kick immigrants out, and to generally terrorize immigrants who are currently in the U.S. And with that, I will pass it back to you, Yasmin.
Great. Thank you so much, Diana. So our next speaker is Layla Ayub. Layla is an immigration attorney and co-founder and co-director of Project Anar. Project Anar is an Afghan community immigration justice organization formed and led by Afghan American women in partnership with other immigration lawyers that focuses on legal services, community education, and advocacy. And Layla is going to talk through the Afghanistan TPS termination, the announcement that came out on April 11th, and how that's going to be impacting Afghans here in the States, and how we can be helpful to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I will talk a little bit about the context for why the TPS designation for Afghanistan was important, and kind of where we are with things now, and some of what we are working on. Exactly as of about 2 weeks ago, it's been reported that the Trump administration will be ending, or the TPS designation for Afghanistan will be terminated. There has not been any official notice through the regulatory process for this, and we've seen legal challenges, lawsuits on other TPS related decisions. So it's possible that this reported termination could also be subject to litigation, but at this time, there hasn't been any official notice or update. And we're just going off of this information that the administration has decided to terminate the designation. Because of this termination, TPS is expected to end on May 20th for Afghans. That was the original designation. And the designation runs from November 2023 until then. So that is about a month away. Without this decision, TPS would have, like, through the regular statutory process, it would have lasted a little bit longer for Afghans who already had it. So this was a very deliberate choice to take away this protection from Afghans who needed it. The TPS designation came through advocacy, largely through the Afghan community and other immigration advocates. And it was a needed protection, particularly for Afghans who arrived after August 2021 through the evacuation, and those who arrived since then through the southern border because they didn't have access to other immigration pathways. There has been ongoing advocacy for an adjustment act through Congress, which there is historical precedent for adjustment acts like that passing through Congress through legislation at times of wartime evacuations, which was the situation for Afghans. However, that did not happen, and TPS was a needed protection as people wait for any other immigration processes. What we're seeing now is that there are many asylum seekers who are now being subject to anti-asylum policies and executive orders and different directives that are leading to asylum processing and other immigration processing being paused or frozen indefinitely. And these temporary protections allowed people to access work authorization and to have a little bit of a sense of safety, and now that has been taken away from people. So what we're seeing is that even in the absence of an official ban, decisions like this are effectively taking away pathways from our communities. So what we are advising folks and just reminding people right now is that anyone who is at first that this is the goal of the administration, to cause fear in our communities and to create this kind of chaotic environment, but there's steps that people can take to continue to protect themselves, and many people might still have access to protections like work authorization through other pathways, such as a pending asylum application. So we encourage everyone to maintain their proof of TPS if they have that, and maintain their proof of any other immigration processes that they might be have pending applications for, and to be cautious about travel, and to speak to an attorney if they are planning any sort of travel, especially, but also in general, just about their situation, especially if there's anyone who only has TPS protection. And Anar has been doing a series of multilingual Know Your Rights webinars. So we will have our next one in May, and you can follow us to find out about that. It should be announced by early next week, where we'll share more updates and the latest guidance as this is constantly changing.
Great. Thank you so much, Layla. Really appreciate all the great work that you and your colleagues are doing. So our next speaker that I wanted to introduce is our dear colleague, Gulnaz Fakhimi. She's the legal director at Muslim Advocates. Muslim Advocates is also one of the co-chairs of the No Muslim Ban Ever campaign. Gulnaz, her experience and expertise covers deportation defense, criminal defense, defense of alleged war on terror suspects, habeas corpus actions, and civil rights actions. And Gulnaz will kind of walk through us, provide a kind of a bigger picture. We'll zoom out, pull together by kind of an understanding of what banning means and how that spans kind of a broad spectrum of harm that the administration is driving. Thank you so much, Gulnaz.
Thanks, Yasmin. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. So I think, like Yasmin said, my goal is to sort of zoom out a bit and kind of ground us in some through lines and bottom lines that I think connect a lot of the different kinds of harms that my colleagues on the call have been uplifting, and to kind of present them to you as part of a a bigger picture, and one that sort of presents potentially to anyone who's part of that bigger picture opportunities for power building. And so I think to sort of start us off with the question of like, what does banning look like? What does banning mean? Linda started us off by kind of pointing out how under the Trump 1.0 administration, entry bans that came to be known as the Muslim and Africa bans were something that the administration really beat its chest about and publicly announced in a way that was plain for everyone to see. And this time around, we're not seeing that happen, or not yet. And instead, what we're seeing is a lot of incremental harm that seems to be driven by national origin discrimination. And I think that it's important to recognize that national origin discrimination, it's one way of banning people, and the underlying driver of who is sort of targeted for different forms of banning, I think, is one that's worth naming to ourselves in a space like this. So, the administration has beat its chest and hasn't sort of been shy about some of the underlying objectives that are driving its various policies all across the spectrum. So, we know that it has white supremacist Christian nationalist aims that are a through line to so many of its policies. And so I think one thing I want to encourage us to do is think about banning through that lens, and who all gets implicated by banning through that very, very broad lens. Our communities know all too well from lived experiences spanning administrations going back very far in time, how those viewpoints of white supremacism and Christian nationalism, how they impute danger, supposed danger, onto Muslim identity, and onto like racialized identities across the spectrum of people who are Black, African, Arab, Muslim, Middle Eastern, South Asian, Latine, AAPI, the list goes on. So like the desire to sort of racially ban non-white people is alive and well on the part of this administration. And we know that racial exclusion and national origin-based exclusion isn't where things stop with this administration. There's ideological harm and viewpoint-based targeting with Palestine advocacy at the tip of the spear. That's very much part and parcel of how the administration and its supporters conceive of personhood, who gets to count as a person, who gets to belong in a society like American society. And we know that the measures used to sort of make those judgments extend to other disfavored categories in the administration's view, including like gender-based categories, sexual orientation-based categories, and the list goes on. And so I think something that stands to be super powerful for any of us who are in the crosshairs of any of these forms of exclusion or banning is to recognize really that old adage of strength in numbers, and to recognize that there's a lot of power in knowing sort of that we are united in being targeted by these prerogatives, and there's an opportunity for us to find and draw strength from each other beyond silos in which we may otherwise understand our own experiences and struggles. So just wanting to sort of uplift some of these themes with a lot of gratitude to the NoMuslimBanEver coalition for holding this space and allowing for consideration of banning through the sort of broadest lens, which is, I think, the one that the administration is applying.
Great. Thank you so much, Golnaz. Really appreciate it. Our next speaker is Zahra Bilu. She serves as Executive Director of the Council on American-Islamic Relations, San Francisco Bay Area. Zahra manages a team of civil rights and social justice advocates dedicated to the empowerment of American Muslims. Zahra's remarks will focus on ways that you can keep yourself, your family, safe while traveling, and kind of best practices and digital protection as well. Zahra, turn it to you.
Yasmin. And I really appreciated how Gulnaz handed that transition to me. She was like, how are we thinking about bans in the broadest sense possible? I think the way we've been talking about it among ourselves, and Gulnaz included, is like and I still don't know who said this, but it's death by 1,000 cuts, which is how we talk about subscription fees, but is also how we're talking about now the Trump administration and his executive orders. And so while many of us have been waiting for one big travel ban to come, instead what we are seeing is new attacks on our communities at every front. And the broader impact of this is that a lot of people are fearful of what to do, how to do, and how to move. And so I'll run through some frequently asked questions that we're getting about travel for citizens and non-citizens. But before I do, let me tell you that the thing that will matter the most, that I will say, that I hope all of you will take back to your members and stakeholders, to your staff and others. And to start, it is that in any and all interactions with law enforcement, be they Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, the Federal Bureau of Enforcement, Federal Bureau of Investigation, or other local police officers, you always have the right to remain silent, always. And what we have been telling our stakeholders is you can always talk yourself into trouble. You can very rarely talk yourself out of trouble. And so no matter whether you're a citizen or not, whether you're at the border or otherwise, you always have the right to remain silent. When you are present in the United States, separate from being at a border, you always have the right to an attorney, and you should always assert both of those rights. The role of an attorney is to protect you and work with you to ensure that you know what you're getting into and what's going on. Even among attorneys, and I think my fellow attorney presenters would agree, we all have our own attorneys that we would call. We were long taught a lawyer who represents themselves represents a fool. And so don't try to represent yourself, because none of us are doing it. And then the last thing I'll say, and this is coming up in the context of the FAQs, is if it leaves your lips or fingertips, it is forever. So if you wouldn't want to see it on a billboard, it shouldn't be on your phone. So there's been a lot of questions about what can I have on my phone, what shouldn't I have on my phone, and I can get into a little bit more specifics about that. But if you wouldn't want to see it on a billboard staring at you as you are driving home, or worse, driving to your mom's house because she'll ask you about it, don't put it on your phone. Don't have it on your phone, right? Whether that's at the border or otherwise. So those are the three headlines, right? Always remain silent, always ask for an attorney, and don't have it on your phone if you don't want someone else to see it, because somebody else certainly will, and it won't be who you wanted. Now, with all that said, there's a lot of fear and concern about borders and my rights at the border. So I want to note, as has been said at the beginning, this is not individual legal advice. This is just general information. If you are a US citizen, you always have the right to enter the country, always. You don't have the right to enter the country hassle-free. That's a privilege. You don't have the right to fly into the country. That's a privilege. But you always have the right to enter. And our advocacy to US citizens has been to remember that, because to come at it from a place of strength allows you to respond to any questions you may get at the border with, that's not relevant to my entry, right? Where I was born has nothing to do with the fact that I'm a US citizen and I'm coming in now. Whose wedding I went to has nothing to do with the fact that I'm a US citizen and I'm coming in now. What my profession is has nothing to do, you get the gist, right? And if you continue down that line, unlocking my phone has nothing to do with the fact that I'm a US citizen and I'd like to re-enter the country. Will this lead to hassle? Potentially. But I can also tell you that the majority of people who have reached out to us proactively, worried about hassle, have not had any hassle. And so, yes, there are some really bad stories coming in, but for the overwhelming majority of people, it's been a smooth reentry into the United States. Now, non-citizens, you don't have the right to enter the country. Every time you present yourself at the border, they are asking, is this person admissible, right? And they are assessing you for that. And so non-citizens, this is one of my least favorite things I have to say, but non-citizens, a number of our organizations issued guidance several months ago that urged that you minimize non-essential travel. Now, we're not in a position to tell you to skip your wedding, though I did have a client who did that. We're not in a position to tell you not to go see a sick relative, right? We just want you to understand what the risks are when you are coming back in, because we have seen increased scrutiny of different visa holders. And that has, in some instances, meant very hassled re-entry. And in some instances, it has meant people cannot re-enter. And so if you are a non-citizen who is planning international travel, we do recommend that you consult with your immigration attorney before you do that. If you don't have an immigration attorney, you can reach out to any of the organizations on the call. Either we offer those services in-house or we've got really robust referral lists. The last thing I'll say is your devices, because do I need a burner phone is my favorite FAQ of the month. It doesn't hurt to have a burner phone, because a burner phone will have less information on it than your actual phone. Could a burner phone invite more suspicion, i.e., is your real phone in your checked bags? Yes. So I'll give you some basic safety tips around your phone usage to follow what I said initially about billboards, and then you can make your decisions, right? Everything you put on any phone ever, assume someone has access to it, right? Whether that's Meta responding to a warrant from the federal government, or on a bad day, you weren't resistant to a police officer and you gave them your password. So first things first, anything you put on your phone, assume is not private. You want it to be private. We aspire towards a world where that's possible. Assume it's not. If for no other reason, one of your frenemies will screenshot something you put on your phone and show it to a future boss, operate with that assumption. The second is make sure that your Face ID and your fingerprint ID are turned off. Law enforcement can hold your phone up in front of you and unlock it if your Face ID is turned on. They can also force you in some instances to use your fingerprint to unlock your phone. In no case can they force you to enter that passcode. You're not going to turn it off in a moment of panic. Turn it off now. Leave it off always. And then when you are coming across borders in particular, US citizens, we recommend that you object to any search of your phone, that you refuse to provide that password. Because if you do, any information that is downloaded from your phone not only endangers you, but everyone else that was in your phone, anyone that you were in touch with or otherwise. Non-citizens, here's the thing, not providing your password could lead to a denial of admissibility. And then you just get turned around and sent to where you came from. And I don't mean that in a MAGA way, I mean that in a literal way. Within 24 to 48 hours, you will be on a return flight back to where you flew in from. And so I'm not going to tell you to provide your password or not provide your password. I'm going to tell you to be really cautious of the risk. In that instance, it may actually make sense to have a burner phone, because if you're going to comply, you want to make sure that you're putting as little information as possible into the hands of law enforcement. But you also then shouldn't have your actual phone anywhere near you, because if it's in your checked bags, they will find it. To sum up, 3 things. You always have the right to remain silent. You always have the right to an attorney. And if it's on your phone, you should be ready that it could be on a billboard at any given time. Thank you. Back to you, Yasmin.
Great. Thank you so much, Zahra. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Ishraq now, and he's going to open it up for Q&A.
Sure. Thanks, Yasmin, on that. So I know there are a few questions that have already popped into the Q&A feature. Feel free to continue to add some questions. Zahra, there was some questions that I think maybe relevant for you to share, to react to, but I'm going to invite all the panelists to kind of take a glance. But a couple of questions that I'm seeing: as a green card holder, if you're going to get detained, would it be possible to ask for deportation instead of detention? Again, knowing that we're not giving legal advice here, but just kind of generic pieces here. Someone else had asked, does the U.S. Border Control have the right to open your phone? And I think you were alluding to that. Is it legal? And then somebody actually asked in the chat, should American citizens carry their passports alongside their license on a daily basis? Seems like those are kind of nuts and bolts KYR pieces that might be relevant for you to respond to, Zahra.
I can take a stab at them, and then others like correct me, chime in, add, like tell me if you disagree. If you are a green card holder, the primary advice we have been giving people is if you have any reason to be concerned on your re-entry, for example, you stayed away too long, consult with an immigration attorney before you land in the United States, not during, because you won't get a hold of anyone during. And the really important thing to note is that green card holders, it's not like you can't just turn a green card holder around from the border. That's actually harder to do. So what's really important is that you ask for deferred inspection. You'll be provided with a notice to appear, and you should never sign anything, right? And so that's key for green card holders. But do not ask for a deportation. I could only begin to imagine the nightmare of consequences that would invite. The other question about phones: do they have a right to open your phone? Is it legal? They have the authority to confiscate your phone. To unlock your phone, if you have a complex password on, would require some level of reasonable suspicion. They would need to get a judge to get them the warrant. It's a whole complicated process, right? But if you have your Face ID on, it doesn't matter, because if I'm a cop, I'm just going to hold the phone in front of your face and unlock it. This matters at protests too, by the way. So all of this focus on borders. If you're going to any protests and you've got your Face ID accessible, that's actually a bigger danger, and you're more likely to have issues there. And then the last one was, should I carry my passport around? I know some people are thinking about that and doing that. You're not required to. And in the instances where we've seen legal residents and/or U.S. citizens be detained by ICE or other law enforcement agencies, it doesn't appear that documentation on someone's body has been helpful, because they're not believing the person or accepting it. What's been critical there has been mobilization and legal advocacy. And so you could, but I don't find it convincing a racist agent. And we're not urging anyone to do that. Like, we're not there yet.
I'll just quickly chime in there. So I'm in Florida with my family. There's been, I think folks have seen numerous instances where citizens have been picked up, and like Zahra has mentioned this. I'm a naturalized citizen, as is my family. I have recommended my family members, my siblings and my parents, to carry their passport with them wherever they go. Only because, and I do the same, I carry my passport with my license everywhere I go, only because I just, like, I understand that in certain cases, or maybe many cases, it won't make a difference, but just like as someone who like is also a lawyer and cares about like my family, I'm just trying to kind of mitigate like bad scenarios. I'm thinking that maybe it would be helpful for them to have it, but I think everyone's just different. Yeah.
Great. And I see there's a lot of kind of particular questions around, travel advice. I'm going to invite our panelists is kind of, you can type those answers into the chat. And if there's something that's kind of relevant to bring up, that would feel free to kind of vocalize that. One question that came up earlier was, how can allies and communities not targeted by immigration officials support directly impacted communities? I'll just say this, as a coalition that's fighting on an advocacy front at the legal level, at the grassroots mobilization level, at the level of also trying to disseminate resources, also thinking about how can we be like proactive bystanders. I think there's some resources available within the community, within different organizations to help to ensure that, you know, we're being mindful of all our community members. But I'm happy to kind of defer to CAIR, Muslim Advocates, ACT, on any kind of specific recommendations, or if there's any specific kind of trainings that y'all recommend, or yeah, specific steps that you recommend for allies to help out with.
I'm going to come off mute just to sort of offer a couple of pieces of food for thought in addition to the sort of opportunities for action that others on the call uplifted in terms of like supporting proposed legislation that stands to be protective of non-citizens. I think, I guess, a couple of bottom lines. I think whatever folks who consider themselves allies can do to kind of use their own voice and privilege to pierce and kind of rebut and refute what's very toxic and harmful rhetoric. So, you know, to contribute sort of useful sort of expression about, you know, the things that they consider essential to the like fabric of American society and sort of the way in which it's pluralistic. I think that's one thing that anyone is empowered to do. I think that there are many contexts in which vulnerable non-citizens face very acute risk. So that may be in connection with having to appear for court proceedings, that may be in connection with having to appear for scheduled check-ins with immigration authorities within the interior. And I think that there are powerful ways in which allies who themselves have citizenship or are otherwise privileged can offer accompaniment and kind of bear witness in ways that can be harm reductive and sometimes protective, actually, of people who are headed into very acutely risky situations. And I think that on the back end, we can kind of flag what are ways in which folks can kind of sign up for those sorts of opportunities. And then one other thing to uplift here is in this landscape, there's a lot of need for legal advocacy to try to protect at-risk non-citizens. And there's a lot more need than there is resources to meet the need. And so I think folks who have means and resources can contribute their resources to advocacy organizations to try to ensure that there's more resources available to meet this ocean of need. But I'm sure others have ideas here too.
I would echo what Gulnaz has mentioned, and add that specifically for a lot of our community members, we have, you know, seen a lot of fear, a lot of hesitation to really be out in front in ways that we were in the past, and so. Really having allies, you know, out there, not necessarily, you know, still allowing space for folks who are directly impacted, but in circumstances where that may put people at risk, being willing to step up to kind of serve as that voice. Additionally, I think you know, our organization, we have chapters located on the East Coast. We are represented by, we are in blue districts, blue states, but having folks around the country, particularly if they are represented by you know, members of the House or members of the Senate who have more influence than Democrats, really reaching out to them, you know, even if you are in a red state where you think that it doesn't, your voice won't be heard, it's still important to make your voice heard. It's still important to be out there pushing back against a lot of what this administration, all of what this administration is doing, and really, really making it difficult, even though we're seeing that members of Congress aren't doing anything, but making it difficult for them to even do what they are attempting to do. Right now, I'm thinking about reconciliation and their attempts to, strip money from programs and services in order to give funding or tax cuts to the rich. So, just a few other ideas that I thought that I would add, but there's definitely opportunities there to support in this moment.
Well, thank you both, Dan and Gulnaz, for sharing your advice there. We're actually a bit at time in terms of Q&A, but for folks, feel free to drop them in the question and answer feature. Our team will be able to take a look at them, and based on our capacity and resources, we will be able to respond to y'all individually. Yasmin, I see your hand up. As a facilitator, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, just really quickly, I think Robert put this question in the chat earlier about if there's any indication as to why the ban hadn't dropped. So the last we had heard, I think folks saw that last press conference, the press briefing that the Department of State had, where they in the press briefing, it was indicated that there was going to be a delay, and at that point it was just clear that they weren't even intending to do the ban in the near future. And then the other part of it was we had heard rumors that it had to deal with part of it was dealing with athletes who were going to be traveling to the US. There needed to be specific exemptions for them. I mean, the Olympics, I guess, are going to be held in the US in 2028. So I heard that was part of it. Wasn't entirely why the ban was delayed, but part of it was because of the athletes.
Well, thank you for that. So in the interest of time, I'm just gonna kind of push through to next steps. So folks have been asking if this webinar will be recorded. It is being recorded. It's currently on Instagram right now. It'll be on our social media across the host organizations, as well as the NoMuslimBanEver Coalition over the next few days. Everyone that has registered for the webinar will also get a link with the resources that were mentioned during the conversation, as well as the ones that you're seeing on this slide. So that way we can continue to stay in touch. So right now we shared some of the links that were mentioned throughout the conversation, and then we'll be updated with a few more of the links that were mentioned before. In terms of next steps from our end, we will continue to keep folks updated if the travel ban, once the travel ban is announced in full, or if it's coming in piecemeal, what kind of actions we recommend folks to take, and whatever resources our crew of partner organizations and endorsers across the country are recommending. So go visit NoMuslimBanEver.com. Feel free to sign up over there for updates. Follow us, our accounts on social media, and you'll be able to stay in touch with us. I think that's about it. Is there anything else that I'm missing, Yasmin? Anyone else from the team here?
I don't think so. And then if all of the action links weren't dropped, we can also follow up in a follow-up email with all the attendees to include those.
And I think, Zara, you'll be dropping the links in the chat.
KAIRs, the actions for Mohsen Mahmoud, Ramesa, and so forth. And yeah, we'll definitely do that.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We hope that you have a safe week and then we'll stay in touch.
Bye. Thank
Very
you.
much.